So Mark chapter 6, verses 1 to 6. 3 questions for us this afternoon that we'll consider in our passage. The first is this: what kind of Jesus do you want? What kind of Jesus do you want? Thinking about the first 3 verses. We all love a great homecoming, don't we? The local child spreads their wings. They head out into the big wide world. Somehow, against all the odds perhaps, they make their mark. They gain recognition. They achieve some kind of success. And with it, normally, comes a great sense of pride to people in the place that they came from. Those people head back home at some point, and the place where it all began, well, often there's a great party waiting for them, isn't there? Then you think about the reality TV shows. They love a great homecoming episode in those really long series that drag out for month after month. On the Great British Bake Off, they love to show the kind of kitchen worktop where it all began. Maybe they zoom into the older sister standing in front of the oven where the contestant made their very first cake. Or remember the X Factor back in the day? There's the homecoming episode, the new reality music star. They go back to their old school so they can have this emotional reunion with the music teacher who really believed in them all those years ago. They can express their thanks. We love a good homecoming. Nottingham, the city we used to live in for a number of years before we came here, they've had a great homecoming the last few months. Their football team, Nottingham Forest, won the playoff at Wembley, back in the Premier League, first time in 23 years. What a homecoming they had. Thousands and thousands lined the streets. The city was painted red, flares were lit, people were climbing the lampposts, and so it went on. Tremendous scenes. In our passage today, in Mark 6, Jesus heads home. Look what it says there in verse 1. Jesus left there, that is the lake region around Galilee. Jesus left there and went to his hometown, accompanied by his disciples. Jesus is heading back to Nazareth, where it all began, in a sense. I wonder what reaction would he receive? What kind of homecoming would Jesus enjoy? Well, it seems to start off really well, doesn't it? Take a look at chapter 6 and verse 2. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. It's like a good homecoming to begin with. We see as we read on, they're amazed by 2 things to do with Jesus. You can spot them as we read on. Where did this man get these things, they asked. What's this wisdom that has been given him? What are these remarkable miracles he is performing? You spot the 2 things they're amazed by when it comes to Jesus. First, they're amazed by his wisdom and his teaching. And they're right to be amazed, aren't they? Because his teaching has been amazing. Back in Mark chapter 1 and verse 27, contrasting Jesus' teaching with the teaching of the religious rulers of the day, we read, and here's the quote from chapter 1, verse 27, the people were all so amazed, they asked each other, what is this? A new teaching and with authority. So they're amazed at Jesus' teaching. And they're amazed at something else as well. It's there at the end of verse 2. What are these remarkable miracles he is performing? They're amazed by his miracles. And again, they're right to be amazed because Jesus' miracles have been absolutely amazing. At the chapter before, the passage we're in today, end of chapter 4 into chapter 5, we see Jesus do 4 incredible miracles. He's commanded a raging storm to calm down. Quiet, be still, he said. And then immediately the wind died down and it was completely calm. He's healed a man in slavery to evil spirits, a pitiful man. You read about in Mark chapter 4, a man who'd been excluded from his community. This guy would wander around the tombs in the hills, cutting himself with stones. Yet when Jesus drove out the spirits, this man was restored. The others in the community saw him sitting, no longer distressed. He was clothed in his right mind. Then there was a 3rd miracle there in chapter 5. Jesus healed a lady who'd been subject to bleeding for 12 long years. She'd spent all she had trying to be treated. Yet just with a touch of his cloak, immediately she's healed. And then incredibly, even more incredible still, Jesus raises a dead girl back to life. No wonder the people in Jesus' hometown were amazed at the remarkable miracles Jesus was performing. So as this homecoming begins to unfold, maybe you can kind of sense this great party in the background. Maybe the big band is out there. Maybe the red carpet's being rolled out for the Lord Jesus back on his home turf. Maybe the locals aren't just amazed. Maybe they're full of pride because Jesus, this great teacher, this great worker of miracles, he's one of their own. But then we come to verse 3. And it's like this brass band we might have imagined playing in the background. It suddenly goes eerily silent. And the red carpet appears to be ripped from under the feet of Jesus. Have a look at verse 3. Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. It's quite a turnaround, isn't it? At one moment they're amazed. Now they're just offended by Jesus as he comes home. I wonder why they take offense. Well, if we look carefully at verse 3, I think there's 3 reasons we see. They take offense at Jesus. Have a look. Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us? What are these 3 things? What are the 3 reasons why they take offense? Number 1, they take offense at him. They're not impressed by him. Firstly, because of his job. What do they say? Isn't this the carpenter? Now, make no mistake, being a carpenter in the day of Jesus, it was a very skilled trade, as it is today. But it was also just plain normal. Just plain normal. If Jesus had started working with his father, aged about 12, as tradition would suggest, he'd have been working in Nazareth at this point for about 18 years by now. Jesus in Nazareth was the guy you called when your door got jammed or your roof sprang a leak. That was the carpenter. As someone has said, in the culture of the day, the carpenter was a reassuring symbol of normality. And so they took offense at him. Second reason perhaps they took offense. What do they say? Isn't this Mary's son? Notice they don't say Joseph's son or Mary and Joseph's son. What were they really saying? Or perhaps they were saying, isn't this the illegitimate child of Mary? Or at least insinuating it. No one really knows who his father is, do they? And so they took offense at him. Thirdly, they took offense because of his family. Isn't this the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us? It's like they're saying, look, we know these people. This is a normal family from a normal place. Someone has said Nazareth at the time was an obscure hamlet of earthen dwellings, chopped into 60 acres of rocky hillside, with a total population of 500 at most. Makes Marlborough look like some kind of metropolis, little sleepy Nazareth, 500 people. And so when the people of Nazareth look at Jesus, what do they see? It seems they stop seeing his amazing teaching and his great miracles. They stop thinking he's someone truly great, because all they see is a normal man from a normal family, from a very normal town, doing a very normal job. And they think to themselves, Jesus, I mean, who do you think you are? You're just one of us. You can't be that special. And they take offense at him. They don't want to accept he could be someone great, and they refuse to believe in him for who he truly is and for who he claims to be. One of the commentators on the passage says this: humanity wants something other than what God gives. The greatest obstacle to faith is not the failure of God to act, but the unwillingness of the human heart to accept that the God who came to us is only a carpenter, the son of Mary. Sure, I mean, the good people of Nazareth were happy to have Jesus on their terms. A Jesus, as one writer puts it, who you could use when you wanted him, when you needed him, when things had gone wrong. But a Jesus you submit to, a Jesus who is King and Lord, well, no thanks, they were saying. Jesus is just too plain ordinary. I want a different Jesus to that. I wonder, friends, can I ask, what are you looking for in Jesus? What kind of Jesus do you want? You know, you can hear his teaching and you can't fail to be amazed. Here is a man who speaks life like nobody else, a man who practices what he preaches. Such people are in short supply, it seems, ourselves included. And you can look at his works, you can look at his miracles, you can look at the evidence of what he's done through history. There's no one like him. He commands our obedience, therefore. But I wonder, is that the kind of Jesus that you want? You see, if you follow Jesus as he claims to be, you've got to do what he says. It means admitting your sin. It means repenting of it, turning around from it 180 degrees. It means believing in the good news. It means denying yourself, taking up your cross, following Jesus. I wonder, is that the Jesus that you want to follow? At times he can seem so ordinary, can't he? Born in a stable, rejected fame, hoarded no earthly riches. So many other leaders out there look much more impressive, don't they? And so maybe perhaps like many back in Nazareth there, you want a Jesus on your terms. A Jesus perhaps you can understand. Maybe you want the carpenter that you can call when the doors in your life get jammed or the roof springs a leak. A Jesus who's there when you need him, when you want him. A Jesus who's there when things have gone wrong on your terms, but nothing more. A bit like this guy who honestly wrote the following. Jesus is the one I turn to when I can no longer rely on myself to pull through on a tough situation. He's also the one I turn to when I really want something. Friends, I wonder about all of us. What kind of Jesus do we really want in our lives? Second question. What kind of Jesus do you need? We've thought about the kind of Jesus we want, but look at verse 4 with me. What kind of Jesus do we need? It's fair to say there are times in life when what we want isn't always what we need. Take a silly example. When I'm thirsty, as my family will tell you, I often like to drink some Coke. Who doesn't like to drink a nice ice-cold Coke on a day like today? But is it what I need? Well, you can ask my dentist. They'll tell you the answer. In fact, one dentist did once tell me what they thought to my situation. It wasn't long after we moved to the church here, and there was a men's event, a barbecue happening at John and Ruth Fleming's house. I had no idea going to John's house for the first time that he was a dentist. We were told to bring some drinks along to share for the barbecue, so I bought two, a bottle of Coke and a bottle of Diet Coke. We had a lovely evening. There were lots of drinks there. They didn't all get drunk. So on their way out, sitting on the kitchen top with my 2 bottles of Coke. I was heading home, thanked John for a great evening. And he said, "Oh, do take your drinks with you." I said, No, please, you have them. Thinking I was being very kind. He pointed at the first one, the diet one. He said, "Michael, this one will dissolve your teeth." And then he pointed at the full-fat Coke and he said, "This one will rot and dissolve your teeth." Off I went with 2 bottles of Coke. Didn't really heed his advice, I'm afraid. What we want isn't always what we need, is it? What we want isn't always what we need. You can take a more serious example. There's maybe a teenager going through a rebellious phase growing up. What he or she might want is a perception of total freedom from any rules or advice from their parents or their teachers, whatever it might be. What he or she needs, of course, is something quite different, usually. What we want isn't always what we need. We've got to acknowledge that the kind of Jesus we might want is not necessarily the kind of Jesus we need. Let's take a look at verse 4 together. Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor, except in his own town, among his relatives, and in his own home." A prophet is not without honor, except in his own town, among his relatives, and in his own home. Jesus, speaking about himself, it seems here, he says a prophet has no honor in 3 different places. Have a look at them. First, he has no honor in his hometown. Just seen that really clearly, haven't we, in the first 3 verses. Second, he says a prophet has no honor among his relatives. Again, you read back into Mark's gospel, you see that's been the case also. Chapter 3 and verse 21, Jesus' family hear about all that's been going on. They hear about Jesus' teaching and the crowds that had gathered. And this is what it says in chapter 3, verse 1. The family go to take charge of Jesus before they said he's out of his mind. That's what Jesus' family said about Jesus. They said he's out of his mind. A prophet has no honor among his relatives. Third thing Jesus says there in verse 4, A prophet has no honor in his own home. Now, he could be referring to the same thing as his family. But why would he need to say it again? It seems he's teaching us something different here. Jesus is pointing us ahead to the time he'll go to Jerusalem, when he'll enter the temple, his father's house, his father's home. Once more, he'll be rejected in that place, just as he was in his hometown, just as he was by his family. So he'll be in Jerusalem. And not only rejected, as Jesus predicts in chapters 8, 9, and 10, Jesus will be betrayed and he'll be condemned to death. And people will mock him and spit at him. They'll flog him and they'll kill him. 3 days later, he'll rise again. Why is he going to do these things? What will be the result of him having no honor in his home? Mark 10, verse 45, Jesus came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. See, not only was Jesus willing to look plain ordinary as he came into this earth, he was willing to be rejected. Rejected by those he came to serve, rejected by his family, rejected even by his Father in heaven. As Jesus was to hang on the cross outside the city, what is it he would cry later in Mark's gospel? My God, why have you forsaken me? Friends, this humble, rejected, crucified man may not be the kind of Jesus you expect. He might not even be the kind of Jesus that you want. But friends, he is the Jesus that you need. You need him. As you think back over those 4 miracles we referred to earlier, what do we see before Jesus intervenes? We see a storm. We see chaos in creation. We see a man enslaved to the power of evil spirits. We see a woman who'd spent all she had, yet after 12 years, still subject to bleeding. We see a young child succumbing to the ultimate curse, death itself. We see a kingdom that without Jesus, all of us are a part of. A kingdom marked by sin, our rebellion against God, marked by its consequences. A kingdom that promises to give us whatever we want, yet a kingdom that ultimately takes everything away. A kingdom that offers us freedom, yet leads us to slavery. A kingdom that offers us life, yet will bring us ultimately to death. Friends, this is the world that Jesus stepped into. And he showed us wonderfully, beautifully, another kingdom. He gave us a glimpse of an eternal kingdom that one day will be established forever. A kingdom where the effects of sin will be no more. Where chaos will be subdued. Where those enslaved will be set free, where sickness will have gone forever, where death is replaced by life. And we say, how will that kingdom be established? How can we enter in? Answer, only through this prophet who had no honor, through this humble, rejected Jesus dying a death he didn't deserve, by this Jesus taking the punishment our sin deserved, by this Jesus reversing the effects of sin in our world, by this Jesus making all things new. Friends, he might not be the Jesus you expect, and he might not be the Jesus that you want, but friends, the Jesus we got from heaven, he is the Jesus we need. He's the Jesus we need. What kind of Jesus do you want? What kind of Jesus do you need? Finally, what kind of response will you get? Will I get? Will we get from Jesus? Looking at verses 5 and 6. What kind of response will you get from Jesus? It's been a month or so, or it feels like years or so, I guess now, of political shocks and surprises. Been resignations and rivalries. There have been loyalties kept, sometimes betrayed. There are struggles for power. Passions are running high, even throughout the weekend news and the papers. We know what politics can be like, don't we? Because we've seen it all before. We know what human nature is like, and yet even still, with some of the stuff we're seeing before our eyes, we still get shocked by it, don't we? You know, as you read the gospel accounts of the life of Jesus, you see Jesus is not an easy person to shock. He's not an easy person to shock. Think about the woman at the well, married 5 times already. Now she's living with a guy. Jesus eats with prostitutes and corrupt tax collectors, never to approve of people's sin. But he's never shocked by the sin, is he? Never shocked by it. He's not amazed by it. But he is amazed by something here in our passage, there in verse 6. Have a look. He was amazed at their lack of faith. Literally, he was astonished or greatly surprised at their lack of faith. And I guess we can understand why, can't we? We've seen it in our passage. When people hear his teaching, when they see his miracles, they are totally amazed. All the evidence for belief is before their eyes, and yet they still lack faith. They still take offense at him. And so now it's Jesus' turn to be amazed. He's amazed at their lack of faith. Verse 5 is an interesting verse, isn't it? It tells us something very important about people who amaze Jesus by their lack of faith. Maybe this includes some of us. He could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few people who were ill and heal them. What's all that about? Well, it doesn't mean, of course, Jesus is unable to do miracles in places where people don't believe in him. He's just calmed a storm in the face of the disciples' unbelief. And in this place right here, right now, he does indeed heal people, it says in verse 5. So what's this verse mean? I'm sure you've heard people say at some point, maybe you said it yourself, if only Jesus would do a miracle right now in front of my eyes, then I believe in him. This verse is saying, if people refuse to accept the evidence they already have, then Jesus doing some more miracles is not going to change their mind or their hearts. Friend, if you lack faith in Jesus this afternoon, it's got nothing to do with a lack of evidence. Jesus says a lack of faith in your life is nothing to do with a lack of truth that's available. Now, the lack of faith in your life or the life of someone else is based on a choice, a decision to reject the evidence that's before you. A lack of faith, ultimately, the Bible says, is the result of a proud or a stubborn heart, which causes us to look Jesus in the eye, the Jesus we desperately need, and just to take offense at him. Friend, if that is you, if that is any of us, Jesus is amazed. He's amazed. He's greatly surprised by our lack of faith. And yet at the same time, in love, Jesus says to us, it's time to stop taking offense. It's time to stop chasing after the Jesus you might want. It's time to stop treating Jesus just like the carpenter we call to in our times of trouble on our terms. And it's time to come to the Jesus that we need. It's time to repent, to turn around, to believe the good news, to truly put him first in every part of life. Yes, to come to him in our times of grief and anxiety and pain. Yes, to cry out for the one who can provide for our every need. But to give our lives to him. To come to the Jesus that is life. So friends, let's not be like the guys in Nazareth who were looking for something more impressive. And so they took offense at Jesus. Don't amaze Jesus by your lack of faith, but rather be amazed by Jesus. Be like that woman subject to bleeding. Be like the father who took his daughter to Jesus on the point of death. Be like the man tormented by demons. Come in humility. Come in repentance. And come in faith to the Jesus that you need. He is ready to welcome you. He is ready to forgive you and embrace you and give you new life and welcome you into this kingdom that will never perish and will never spoil and will never fade. Let's pray.